It's time for the Ward Scott Files, hosted by John Martin. Join the Salty Dog and his captain, Ted Yoho. Search for the Ward Scott Files on Facebook, Vimeo, and over 30 audio platforms, including Apple and Spotify. Now here's your host, the Salty Dog, John Martin.
Well, welcome. Good morning to everybody here. Welcome to our Pirate Podcast featuring yours truly, the old Salty Dog, John Martin. And hopefully we'll get my dear friend and colleague, a captain of our pirate ship, Ted Yoho, in here shortly. He is traveling he's on walkabout, so he's going to have to remote in, and we'll see what happens. But we will endeavor to persevere anyway. All right, the first thing that's coming out was late breaking news yesterday that Joe Biden, former President Joe Biden, has been diagnosed with prostate cancer. His personal office announced on Sunday. Now, it apparently is very advanced. I don't pretend to know all the medical details because literally they're just now coming out, but it's gone all the way to the bone. It's stage 4, they say, which from what I understand, it really isn't a stage 5. So it's a very serious thing. And before we get any deeper into it, I just want to say that, I wish the president, former President Biden and his family well. I don't, I'm no fan of the Bidens. That's certainly pretty obvious if you've watched our show any length of time, but I do not wish ill health on anyone. The real question I have about all this is kind of like the kind of famous statement, when did they, who knew it and when did they know? Because if you think about it, it's one thing if you're, and one lesson we need to learn from this is that all of us men need to get diagnosed early as possible. From all the stuff I've seen, we need to be getting our prostate checked on a regular basis. Anybody over 45, any man over 45. So, so far with me, I good news. I just had all that done not too long ago, actually, and God bless. I'm very blessed that my numbers are all good. But the thing that's interesting to me about this is, with Joe Biden, he's the former president of the United States. He was literally president, 100 days ago, 120 days ago, whatever the number is, he was actually president of the United States. So you would think that that they would have known about this much earlier than they did, and perhaps they did, and that brings up several questions as well. Did they know about this before he made any decisions about whether to run for re-election or not? That is a big deal. I mean, we're going to talk a little bit more in a few minutes about the potential cover-ups and all of that kind of stuff. But with the Joe Biden, as I say, literally being president just a few months ago, the fact that he may have some type of advanced cancer, in this case prostate cancer, that literally, I was listening to one doctor on a show this morning. I can't remember the guy's name, but you've seen him. He's on Fox on a regular basis, and he was saying that the type of cancer that Mr. Biden has, and from what he knows, that his chances of surviving another 5 years is less than 50%. So, and he didn't want to put onus on it, but he's just being medical facts there. And of course, we know that Joe Biden is not in the best of health for even a person of his age. So, I say all that to say that, were they going to let this guy, did they know? If they knew, if they being the White House itself, the inner circle knew that the president had this advanced cancer, let's say 6-8 months ago, they would need to do something. And here's the other thing I was thinking about. If they didn't know, then why? Because this is a person who should be getting the most advanced medical care possible, right? The president of the United States, the leader of the free world, should be getting the best care. I'm not saying he wasn't, but it certainly opens up several questions. The number one, as I say, if they knew, when did they know, and who knew, and when did they know? The other thing is, if they didn't know, could this, and I just throw this out there for conversation's sake, could they, in other words, jeopardize this man's life because they didn't want to know? In other words, what I'm saying is, did he not undergo the proper screenings that you would expect any person of his age to go through, let alone the President of the United States, because they didn't want to know and they were afraid that they couldn't keep it hush-hush if it came out? We do know that the Democrats, and this is probably not unique to them, although certainly they're the ones in the news about it, are capable of about anything when it comes to holding on to power. So there's a lot of questions that this arises, but I want to reiterate what I said at the top of the show. My overall is, as a human being, I care about the former president's health. I'm not one of these people that's just a hater to hate on. So do I think Joe Biden should be held accountable for anything that he has done? Absolutely. And he has been held to a certain extent politically accountable because he's not there anymore, right? But I do not wish him and his family any ill health. I don't really wish that on anyone. So we'll have to keep abreast of this and see what happens. All right, if you're just tuning in, right now I'm doing the thing by myself. I'm kind of at the helm all by myself because our captain of our pirate ship, Ted Yoho, is traveling, and he's been remoting in, but he may not be able to do so this morning. I know he was going to attempt to, but it all has to do with internet and where you're located and all that. So if he chimes in, we'll get him on as quickly as possible. But in the meantime, I shall endeavor to persevere, as they say. All right, so we were just talking about former President Biden being diagnosed with a advanced form and acute and fast acting prostate cancer. But this brings up a political question about that kind of followed, as I said at the top of the show, when did they know it? And, who knew it and when did they know it? But we know, as I said a few minutes ago, that these Democrats that were in the White House, they'll do anything to hold on to power. So I'm going to quote a little bit from a Breitbart article because, as you know, over the last few days, the investigation, the tapes have come up now about when I think it's Robert Hur, not Judah Ben Hur, but Bob Hur, who was a Republican, I guess assume it still is, worked for the Justice Department and did an investigation into the classified document case against Joe Biden. And you may remember he famously said that he was not going to prosecute Joe Biden because I think his exact words were something to the effect that he is an elderly, well-meaning man with a poor memory. And the bottom line, he didn't think that any jury would convict him because, he was incoherent. And the tapes that I've listened to so far have really borne that out. So it's kind of scary. And then when you go into all this stuff where they're putting these books out now. I think there's supposed to be a new one released tomorrow that is supposed to be very telling about how incapacitated Joe Biden, nothing to do with his recent cancer diagnosis, but his mental competence is in question. But this is a Breitbart. CNN political commentator Van Jones said Sunday on CNN's State of the Union, that's the one that Jake Tapper hosts, that has now written a tell-all book criticizing the media. My God, for him to do that you talk about the pot calling the kettle black. That's Jake Tapper. But CNN political commentator Van Jones said on Sunday's CNN State of the Union that Democrats would pay for covering up then President Joe Biden's cognitive decline for a long time. Well, I hope he throws himself into that category because they all have been covering this up. I'm going to play a brief snippet from Van Jones' interview on Jake Tapper's show yesterday. So let's play about it, and we'll stop it on the 3:30 mark, only about a minute of the video.
power. This is the emperor's new clothes playing itself out in real time. Everybody knew, but everyone was afraid to say, except for David Axelrod for 2 years, that something was wrong here. And so, I was shocked. I love Joe Biden. I don't like him. I love him. I got a chance to work with him when I was a part of the Obama administration and loved him more every day. I was shocked to see his condition when he came out, and so was the world. And that wasn't the first time he was in that condition. The book makes it very, very clear. There are people who knew and said nothing. And that is a crime against this republic. And I think the Democrats are going to pay for a long time for being a part of what is now being revealed to be a massive cover-up.
And David, in what seemed to be an attempt to get ahead of the book, President Biden and First Lady Biden went on.
Shocked. The man, Van Jones, was shocked, and he didn't know. I mean, give me a break. Anybody who was paying attention knew. Now, the average American out there may not have known if they weren't watching shows like mine in the past, and we're going to talk about that in a minute as well, or shows like, some conservative shows. If they were watching CNN for their news, I could see how they might not know, because they being the White House and the media hid Joe Biden the whole time he was in there. But I was going to say this to Ted, but he's not here today. He may remote in shortly. But I don't know about him, but I'm sure he feels the same way as me. But I'm tired. I'm sick and tired of those media pundits and Democratic politicians acting like they are shocked. Like, oh my God, the first time we realized that Joe Biden was mentally declining was in the debate. I mean, give me a break, man. I'm going to play this video for you. Now, to keep it in perspective, this was played on a show that I did in 2022. And it's Terry McAuliffe. I want to set this up. It's a very short video. You may have seen it. But Terry McAuliffe, who at the time was the head of the Democratic National Committee, speaking to a group of other DNC officials on like a Zoom call, if you will, about Joe Biden. Now, keep in mind, Terry McAuliffe. Now, I want to make sure you understand who this guy is. He was not only at that time the head of the DNC, but he was a former governor of Virginia. Thank God he got defeated. He ran for another, got defeated, tried to come back. But anyway, he also was a bag man, so to speak, the lead bag man for the Clinton administration. I say all that to say, if anybody had the inside dope or scoop on politics, it was and still is to a certain extent a guy like Terry McAuliffe. I don't know what he's doing these days. But again, this snippet I'm about to play is a DNC, Democratic National Committee, conference call that was hosted by Terry McAuliffe, and he's talking about Joe Biden's, at that time, campaign that he ultimately became president doing. Let's listen to it, and we'll come back and talk about it.
People say all the time, oh, we got to get the vice president out of the basement. He's fine in the basement. 2 people see him a day, his 2 body people. That's it.
Keep him in the basement talking about Joe Biden. Remember, Joe Biden literally conducted his presidential campaign from the basement. And people were talking about, we got to get Joe out of the basement. We got to get him out in the field and everything else. And there you have Terry McAuliffe, who I tell you, I would consider him an expert witness when it comes to all things politics, because no one has been deeper in politics than Terry McAuliffe. And he said, oh, Joe Biden just fine in the basement. Let's keep that dude in the basement, man. And then they're going to say they knew nothing. Keep in mind, this was before Joe Biden became the president of the United States. Hook, crook, whatever. I'm not even talking about the election itself, because I said at the time when Joe Biden won the election, and I got banned from YouTube. I'm back on YouTube now. My old John Martin talk show, that site, and you can see my old videos and see what I'm saying I was true about. I actually posted one of them on a couple of our Facebook sites just yesterday, reposted it, so check it out. But Joe Biden, I said on the air that Joe Biden, that man in the White House, is not the President of the United States. And I did not say anything about elections and all that. That's a whole nother story. But I maintain, and I've been proven right, I do believe, that Joe Biden was not running the day-to-day affairs of the United States of America. He simply was not. And even people like now Jake Tapper are having some kind of awakening. And I'm not by any means sitting here telling you that, oh, I'm sharper than Van Jones and Jake Tapper. I'll leave that up to you. I mean, I have my own opinion. And, I'm not in a class by myself, but it takes a very short time to take the role in that class. And I don't think they're in it. But you can't tell me that they didn't know. If I knew, if this old salty dog country boy from Hawthorne, Florida, knew that Joe Biden was incapable of being president of the United States 4 years ago, let alone 6 months ago, then, I mean, my God, you can't tell me they didn't. Here's the thing. They knew. They absolutely knew, and they did nothing. Nothing about it. And that's the real story. And I don't even blame Joe Biden. I don't even blame Jill Biden, although I think certainly we've already had the first female president of the United States, because I think it was probably Jill Biden. But, they're protecting themselves. They're doing in their own selfish self-interest. And if you expected the Bidens to be anything beyond they're selfish and self-centered, then you don't know the Bidens like I know them, and you haven't been paying attention for the last 40, 50 years, because everything they do about circling the wagons behind the Biden clan is very predictable. I blame those people that are in the media that could have been reporting this for us to really, report, you decide, that kind of thing, just the facts or whatever, all these little slogans they do. I blame them, and I blame those in power. Keep in mind that when Donald Trump was president, when he was 45, they were literally saying on a daily basis that anybody who had the courage should stand up in that cabinet and do, the 25th Amendment, I think is what it is, question his mental fitness. But none of them said squat about Joe Biden's mental fitness. In fact, I'm going to play you another short video. This is, I think, on Jake Tapper's show as well. He's been a busy bee lately. James Clyburn, who is the current congressman, I think, since the ARC first landed again, from South Carolina, who Joe Biden would not be president, or would not have been president if it weren't for James Clyburn. Here's James Clyburn in his own words talking about what he saw from Joe Biden. Check it out.
His son Beau was either deployed or dying, but Beau was deployed in 2008, 2009, and he died tragically in May 2015. Needless to say, even supporters of the president have heard these tapes and been alarmed by it. What was your response to them? Did you see much of that when you had meetings and interactions with President Biden during his term?
No, I didn't. The fact of the matter is I saw Biden often, but not as often as people seem to think. I saw him, I talked to him on the telephone very often. And I never saw anything that I thought was outside of the ordinary. I watched my dad.
Never saw anything out of the ordinary. I mean, Joe Biden literally is like right now, I'm going to shake. Oh, here's my friend Ted Yoho right here. He's not here, but I'm going to shake his hand anyway. I mean, my God, man, he never saw anything, really. Give me a break. When Joe Biden was campaigning, I mean, some of the things he did during his first campaign, of course, he didn't have a second campaign really, but he's out there, he's introducing his wife and his sister, and he gets confused about which ones are which. And I started to say a cruel joke. I am in the heart of Gator country here, by the way. I started saying he wasn't even in Tennessee. Oh, I went ahead and said it to my friends out there. I'm a diehard Gator. You see my orange and blue. I always got to kind of wear this. If you're wondering where I'm at, if you never tuned into our show, first of all, welcome. But I'm in Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, the podcast room. There's a broader picture of it. They call this the helmet room, and those are helmets that signify various stages of Coach Spurrier's illustrious career. If you've never been to this place, it's in a place called Celebration Point. right off the interstate in Gainesville, Florida. And it is literally a museum, not only to Coach Spurrier's great legacy, but to college football and sports in general. I would recommend you check it out. Not only that, the food here is incredible. But we do a podcast from here every Monday. Right now, we're currently doing a live podcast Monday from here, and then Fridays from wherever we happen to be located. I'm usually in what I call Fort Hawthorne. And we're going to be adding to our show as time goes. But James Clyburn, my God, man, he said he still believes that Biden could have been president of the United States of America. I mean, does anyone else believe that besides Jill Biden going, you answered every question, Joe? All that kind of stuff. It's just insane, man. It's insane. But President Trump, when I was going back and looking at old videos and I came across that Terry McAuliffe one, I came across one, a little snippet of one I used to play on my show in Donald Trump in his own words. And this was during the 2022 campaign. So listen to this. Here's President Trump, and I think his words are truer now than they even were then. Let's play that. I love the man laughing.
Have to now decide whether they will continue defrauding the public with ridiculous bullshit.
You got to love the dude that's recording that off his TV laughing in the background. Remember Donald Trump said, are the Democrats going to keep up this ridiculous, and I'll say it, bullshit? I mean, it's as true now as it ever was. But people are, saying they didn't know is absolutely ridiculous that they didn't know. The only way you could not know is if you had your head under a rock, or maybe you watched, one of them housewives shows or the shopping channel or something for the last 4 years. And that's all you ever watched. Even people on the weather report knew it. But we're going to take a quick commercial break. If you'd like to be a sponsor of our show, you can look on the little moniker that comes on the screen down on the bottom every so often, and it says Contact Freddie. We'd love to have you sponsor our show, because as I say many, many times in the past, and if I say it, it bears repeating, not everyone can be a fighter, but everyone can support those that are in the fight. And this show is in the fight. So we'll take a commercial break and we'll be right back.
Although the owner of Lewis Oil Company maintains she is 29, Lewis Oil turns 60 years old in June. Chevron would like to recognize the North Florida second-generation family-owned business, celebrating its growth and staying power. Lewis Oil Company maintains significant on-hand supplies, strategically located fuel depots, a delivery fleet, on-site service, fuel card locks, and convenience stores. Lewis Oil Company understands its responsibility in the local economy by providing service and delivery on demand and in crisis. As a first responder for 18 Florida counties and the Southeast from Texas to Virginia, we are proud of this rare accomplishment. Lewis Oil delivers.
Coach, it always impressed me how you beat Florida State to win the 1996 national championship.
And I was really impressed with your 06, 08, and 09 Gator teams.
And the way you coached Danny to the Heisman Trophy.
A lot like what you did with Tim Tebow.
You won more SEC championships than you lost home games at the Swamp.
And you had plenty of super games in front of our Gator Nation.
Yeah, there really is something special about the Swamp.
I guess that's why we say about the Swamp, only the Gators get out alive.
To the Swamp and the Gators, with the best beverage served at Spurrier's Gridiron Grill, 100% agave, Los Landeros tequila, aged in bourbon barrels for a smoother taste.
I think you mean Head Beer Coach 1966 lager, a crisp, light, bodied lager for easy drinking.
Nope. Los Landeros tequila, smooth enough to drink neat and bold enough to elevate a cocktail.
1966 lager, enjoyed on game days in the fall or whenever you need a winning cold brew.
Los Landeros tequila.
1966 lager.
Los Landeros.
1966 lager.
Y'all stop bickering. Okay, you're both wrong anyway. The best thing Spurrier's Gridiron Grill offers are Jerry's famous chocolate chip cookies.
And we are back here at our Pirate Podcast here. Yours truly, John Martin, hosting the old Salty Dog. And my friend Ted Yoho, who normally joins me, is on walkabout, as they say, and he may still chime in at some point. But we'll endeavor to persevere. Like from if you're an Outlaw Josie Wales fan, you might know that line. But anyway, so here's some big news. Now, I tell you, this story, you may think that it is not that huge a news, but as President Trump would say, it is huge. And this comes to you from MarketWatch. Stock futures fall after Moody's strips U.S. of its top credit rating. Now, I'm not sure what the market is doing because it literally comes online about the same time that we are. But Moody's dropped the credit rating of the United States. The last major rating firm strips top rank rating more than 13 years after the S&P was first to downgrade U.S. from a AAA rating. You may remember about a decade ago that happened. But and the stock market had just rebounded, right, coming off a reaction from the tariffs and all of that, and pretty much had regained most of what it, if not all, of what it had lost after it had that sharp decline earlier about a month or so ago. So, we'll have to wait and see what it does today. And my thoughts about this, because this issue is actually very, very big. It's about our deficit. It is about our deficit. And as I say, I remember when we used to actually talk about the deficit. We don't even talk about the deficit anymore. You vaguely hear it every now and then. And remember, they used to put the deficit clock that was like just ticking so fast you couldn't even hardly see it. You don't see that much anymore. It's still ticking, by the way. And we're in more and more deficits all the time. But no one really talks about it, do they? Let me back this article. Moody's on Friday said it had cut the U.S. rating by one notch to A, big A, little A1. I don't know exactly what all that means, from a triple A, and that the move reflects the increase over more than a decade in government debt and interest payment ratios to levels that are significantly higher than similarly rated sovereigns. Now, you may say, well, when's the last time we didn't have a debt? Well, technically, and I say technically, I'll explain that in a minute, it goes back to the Clinton administration when Newt Gingrich was the Speaker of the House and Bill Clinton was president. That's the last time we actually had a so-called balanced budget. But there was holes in it even then. We haven't had what they call regular order, which means to go through a regular budget process to have a budget since then. We haven't. And under Republicans, Democrats, everything in between, we have not had a balanced budget. And I saw, literally as I was about to leave the house this morning, that last night the budget committee, I think in the House, one of them passed forward the big, beautiful bill. It's still got to continue through some more votes, but there were 4 Republicans who either abstained or voted against it. And so it's still potentially in jeopardy. And the biggest gripe about it is that it really doesn't balance the budget either, that it's still a deficit budget and it doesn't really cut spending. All of these are legitimate things and something that we're going to have to work out at some point. But as I said earlier, I remember when we used to actually talk about it. And there's plenty of blame to go around. But I want to play you a commercial from 1992. This is a commercial for Ross Perot, who ran as Reform Party at the time, I believe, in 1992. Listen to this commercial, and we'll come back and talk about it. It's about a little over
the national debt. It is a massive storm that is clouding America's future, an ill wind that is destroying jobs. It is a debt so enormous that it will take 1/3 of the federal income tax collected this year just to pay the interest. $199 billion in interest that could be used to create jobs, but will only be lost in the storm. When will it end? When we choose a candidate who understands that deficit spending is an irresponsible act of government, not an uncontrollable act of nature. A proven business leader who will work with the free enterprise system rather than play politics. The candidate is Ross Perot. The issue is the national debt. The choice is yours.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was in 1992. And Ross Perot was right. He was absolutely right. He may have been the wrong candidate at the wrong time or whatever, but he was absolutely right. And I would ask you, because we've had multiple presidents since then? We've had Democrats. We've had Republicans. What's happened? What has happened? We've had the great Donald Trump, and you couldn't find much bigger fan of Donald Trump than me. I was supporting Donald Trump the minute he came down that escalator. I've been a fan of Donald Trump literally my whole life. But I will say, for the record, Donald Trump has done nothing about the debt, and I'm not laying that all on him. I'm just being real. None of them have. None of them have done anything about the national debt. Republicans or Democrats. There's plenty of blame to go around, but the question I have is, do we have the courage? Do we have the courage as a nation to address the debt issue? And you may say, well, what do you mean? Oh, it's up to, we keep thinking, it's up to the politicians, right? But here we have a Republican-controlled government right now, except for, in a way, the judicial branch, because who knows how they're going to go. That's a whole nother topic. But we have both the House and the Senate, small as those majorities may be. We have the executive branch, but very few are actually talking about reducing the national debt and having a true balanced budget. They talk about it. Even as much as I love Donald Trump, I got to be real, right? Even the president is kicking the can down the road a little bit, right? They basically are telling us that if we can get this big, beautiful bill passed, and I'm for it, by the way, but if we can get this thing passed, then we'll go to regular order in the next cycle. In other words, we'll go to regular budget and have a normal budget in the next cycle. They've kind of been telling us that since 1992 and before that, right? They being all of them have. Now, obviously, I'm painting with a big, broad brush that there are plenty of people that have been up there, including my friend Ted Yoho when he was in Congress, that tried to rein in the deficit spending. But the results have been poor at best, right? They've been poor at best. So I ask, do we have the courage as a nation to address this debt issue? Do we? Because I'm not sure we do. I'm not sure we do. Right now, the president has said, and I get it, he said that we're not going to touch Social Security and Medicaid. Well, the biggest, and I get Medicaid and Medicare confused sometimes, so forgive me on that. But the biggest issue we have right now with this big, beautiful bill is the Medicare spending on it, okay? Because they're saying that illegals are on it, and I'm sure they are. But they're also talking about able-bodied people working. And I support all of that stuff. But in order to make the cuts they need to make, potentially they may have to go back on what the president said, depending on it. The bottom line is, if they do what they're talking about doing, what some of the holdouts are talking about doing, it is going to be perceived as cutting on social services. And it could be a huge issue in the midterm elections. It could very well be. And I have no doubt that it could be. And it could be a pivoting point where the progressives come back into power. And God help us if they do. Because we've already seen what they what they've done before. And if we let them back in spite of all that's been accomplished since we kicked them out, they're going to feel more empowered than ever. If Ocasio-Cortez was the president of the United States, what do you think we'd be doing under her? So that's a scary thought. But here is where I have a big issue. And when I talk about the American people, I'm talking about me too now. I'm talking about all of us. Do we have the political courage to address this issue? Because I've got a meme up here. I don't know if we can put it up. It comes from the old Pogo cartoons where it says, "We've met the enemy and it is us." It's a picture. I don't know if we're going to be able to get that up there. But we have met, I think my producer's working on it now. There you go. We have met the enemy and it is us. There's various versions of this, but it's true. We are our own enemy, right? I was listening to a broadcast on the way in here, and they were talking about the 250th anniversary, which is coming up, I guess, next year, of the founding of the nation. And in it, they were talking about Paul Revere's ride and all, which we just came up on the 250th anniversary of that, Lexington and Concord battle. And the professor from Hillsdale was on there on the show I was listening to, and he made a bunch of incredible comments. And the moderator of the broadcast asked him, this professor, if there's one thing that we have lost as a nation in the last 250 years that we need to go back to, what would it be? And he said the responsibility of self-government. The responsibility of self-government. And I could not agree more. He worded it probably better than this old country boy would. But we keep waiting for a knight in shining armor, someone on a white horse to come up there and save us. Donald Trump, you know, the Cheeto bandit or whatever, you know, and I say that with affection. We expect Donald Trump to help us. And he has helped us tremendously. And he's made tremendous sacrifice to be where he is. So all of my friends out there that are big-time Donald Trump supporters like myself, understand what I'm saying. This issue is, to quote Donald Trump, huge. It's bigger than Donald Trump. It just simply is. And if we're trying to absolve ourselves, we have met the enemy and it is us. It's us, the American people. If we think we're going to elect a government that is better than us, then we're asking what never was and never will be. Like Thomas Jefferson said, if you want a nation to be both ignorant and free, you want what never was and never will be. And this professor from Hillsdale went on to talk about this, self-government. He talked about our personal responsibility. And he said something that I had not really heard quite put this way, but I will steal it and use it. He said that the founding Americans, and he's not just talking about the founding fathers, but the Minutemen, all of this stuff, the American people at that time. And I didn't realize this, let me back up. One of the reasons why we fought the Revolutionary War was because the continental United States, the colonies of the United States, had been basically self-governing for like 150 years at the time of the Revolutionary War. We were already self-governing, and the Crown, the English, were putting restrictions on them, taking away the self-governance basically for money, right? Because they were hurting for money. And so the colonies, they were proud to be British, but they rose up against the Brits because they were more to be self-governing. But this professor said something that I'd not heard put right quite like this. He said, and I'll probably botch it a little bit, but he said that the colonials at that time were not concerned about unrestricted liberty. It wasn't like, and there's a difference between liberty and freedom. Because a lot of times we think that, you hear people say, and I'm sure I might have said, I used to hear this in the drug treatment center myself when I was working there all the time. People say, I don't care what anybody else thinks. I'll do what I want to do. And I'd say, yep, and that's your problem right there. You don't care what anybody thinks. You do what you want to do. They want absolute freedom. There's no such thing as absolute freedom unless you're on a desert island literally by yourself, right? But get back to what this professor was saying. He said they weren't really all that interested in unrestricted liberty. Because they knew that liberty, and this is the key thing, that with liberty comes tremendous amount of responsibility. Get that? With liberty comes tremendous amount of personal responsibility. And that's what we lack as a nation right now. We lack personal responsibility. Heck, half of our people don't even bother to register to vote, let alone actually vote. So half the country, and maybe we're better off without them, I don't know, but half the country still is totally apathetic or feels like they can't do anything about it. And if we maintain that level of apathy, because I used to say on my old show that I was battling ignorance and apathy daily, the growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy that we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. And you heard me say on this show now many times that we need to educate ourselves and others, motivate ourselves and others, and activate ourselves and others. Because if we don't take personal responsibility for our nation, it will never change and it will only get worse. And I'll say it again, if we think we're going to elect a government that is better than us, we the people, then we're just being fools, okay? So, I say again, do we have the courage to actually save our republic? Because that's what we got, a republic, little r, I'm sorry, if we can keep it. All right, let's keep going. More nonsense, this is my own title, More Nonsense About President Trump. So you probably saw this over the weekend, and he did it again, I think literally last night. Bruce Springsteen, who I'm like Donald Trump, and I know there's a lot of boss fans out there, probably less now than there was. I've never really understood the appeal of Bruce Springsteen myself. And I'm not even talking about the politics. I'm just saying I've always thought that he was okay. His band was really good, but I've never been a huge fan of his music. And I didn't knock him. It's not somebody, I've been to a bunch of shows in my life. Matter of fact, I just went to a huge concert, AC/DC in Tampa, with about 70,000 people, my wife and I, this past Friday night. It was spectacular, to say the least. These old 80-year-old guys got some energy that I couldn't imagine. But you know what, I told my wife this after the show was over. When we're riding back, I said, you know what I appreciated the most about it? I have no idea what AC/DC band members' politics are. I have none. And I don't really want to know. And they did not say one political comment one way or another. Period. In that. And I love that. I don't really care whatever. Bruce Springsteen has been bashing President Trump. President Trump called him basically a no-talent prune, but a dried-up prune. But I want to play a snippet. And this is a little compilation. It's only about a minute long of Bruce Springsteen talking about President Trump and America in England, by the way. And we were just talking about the revolution. Check this out.
Men are taking satisfaction in abandoning the world's poorest children to sickness and death. They're taking sadistic pleasure in the pain that they inflict on loyal American workers. They're abandoning our great allies and siding with dictators. They're defunding American universities that won't bow down to their ideological demands. They're removing residents off American streets and without due process of law are deporting them to foreign detention centers and prisons. A majority of our elected representatives have failed to protect the American people from the abuses of an unfit president and a rogue government. America.
Now, keep in mind, that's Bruce Springsteen on foreign soil in the UK. He's doing a tour over there, and he said this very similar things like at least 3 times now over there. But it just, you know, it irks me a bit. Now, he's right about one thing, that the majority of, and we talked about this in the show, in the article I read previously, that our political leaders have failed us in many, many ways. But we fail ourselves if we don't step up. Now I was thinking about this, and I used to say this on my old show all the time, but on our Pirate Podcast, I don't think I've said this, but so it may come as a shock to you, right? This to me is the progressives' motto, really. And I call it the America sucks. This is what the progressives would have you believe. America sucks. It's always sucked. And it sucks more for some than others. And if you vote for us, talking about the progressives, we'll make it suck equally for everybody. That's what equity they want. They want, America has always sucked from the beginning of time. And it sucked for some more than others. And if you vote for us, we'll make sure it sucks for everyone equally. You know, I was talking in the previous segment about this professor, that was Hillsdale professor, talking about coming 250 celebration in the American Revolution. And he was being questioned about various things, and he talked about slavery, talked about the issue of slavery, and how I knew we had, you know, the history of slavery of all different races of people has been going on since the beginning of time, and is still going on. They have slave auctions in sub-Saharan Africa right now. So and the Uyghurs over in China are slaves now. They're organ harvesting and all that kind of stuff over there right now. So slavery has been going on, you know, as I say, man's inhumanity to man has been going on since the beginning of time. But a lot of people don't realize this. The United States of America, as flawed as we are, as many warts as we have, and we strive to be a more perfect union, but we have not always been perfect, and we never will be, right? Because we're human beings having a human experience. But did you know that the very first abolitionist movement, where you actually had a political movement to end slavery of any kind anywhere in the world, was started in the United States of America? Did you realize that? Now that doesn't absolve, and it took a long time after that to actually free the slaves in America. But it started here. That's no small thing. I'll put our record up against anyone, anywhere, anytime in human history. We're the greatest country that's ever been. Are we the perfect country? No. Will we ever be? No. But America does not suck. It does not suck like they try to say. It is the best thing we've found so far. And it is an experiment, ladies and gentlemen. The American experience is an experiment. And as I said earlier in the show, but if I say it, it bears repeating, we're battling ignorance and apathy on a daily basis on this show. The growing ignorance of just how special this experiment we call the United States of America is, and the apathy if we can't or won't do anything and everything to save her. Well, I'm talking about what Bruce Springsteen basically said on foreign soil. But on this American soil, and Ted and I talked about this on Friday, we had James Comey, 8647, the seashell thing. If you don't know what I'm talking about, go look at our podcast from Friday and you'll see. So we're still doing it, still attacking the United States of America. We know the truth in this nation. We know the truth. I want to play you a video right now that just was recorded this past week. They're having a presidential election in Poland, literally as we speak. I can't give you all the details. But this was at a political rally in Poland just this past week. Check it out.
Illegal migration, we will stop the anti-American change in Europe.
Będziemy opierać się nielegalnej imigracji i będziemy opierać się antyamerykańskiej polityce w Europie.
Donald Trump! Donald Trump!
Donald Trump! Donald Trump! Donald Trump! Donald Trump! Donald Trump!
Donald Trump is not just a person, he is a symbol of freedom that will cover all the free world.
Okay, that's amazing.
We will oppose.
I agree with that last statement. That is amazing. Donald Trump. And the guy says Donald Trump is a symbol of freedom throughout the world. This is a guy running for president of Poland. And you hear the crowd spontaneously start chanting Donald Trump before that guy even mentions his name. And this is who Bruce Springsteen is over in England, beaten up on. Ladies and gentlemen, America is the greatest country that we're aware of that has ever been on the planet. Are we perfect? No, absolutely not. We're trying to be in order to form a more perfect union. But I want to stress this, and I cannot stress this enough. The responsibility for correcting this ship, this experiment we call the United States of America, is up to us, the American people. As great as Donald Trump is, it's not up to Donald Trump. He is the president of the United States, but Donald Trump will come and go just like anybody else. Even if we put his face on Mount Rushmore like some people are advocating, and I'm not opposed to that, by the way, it still will be a time when President Trump will not be the president. It is up to us, the American people. And I was looking at some of our statistics on our podcast and some of the memes that I post on our Facebook pages and all that kind of stuff, the insights thing. And the majority of the people that watch us, now we've got a good mix, but the majority of the people that watch us are like 65 and older. And that's understandable. I'm an old gray-haired dude. My granddaughter calls me old man booty. She's 4 years old, so she knows what I am. I'm not denying that. But we need younger people, not just to watch what I'm doing, although I do think you should. Maybe as a grandparent, if you want to give your grandkids an assignment, have them watch our show, and talk about it. Give them a homework assignment. But we've got to educate ourselves and others. We've got to motivate ourselves and others, and we've got to activate ourselves and others. It is up to us to man the political ramparts. We have to be the Minutemen of now. Because, one thing I've seen before, I used to be a commercial fisherman. Spent a lot of time out, 100 miles offshore. In total darkness, in complete darkness, where if I turn the lights off, which I used to do, can't even see your hand in front of your face. You can see a flicker of light for at least 10 to 15, maybe 20 miles, depending on where you are and what the conditions are, cutting through the darkness. So there's always hope as long as that freedom, that candle of freedom is burning. But it can always be snuffed out. And as I've said several times in the last few weeks, can you imagine a world without the United States of America? The Poles that were just chanting over there in Poland, they can't. They realize what we are. They realize the responsibility that we have, the bastion of freedom. Do we? Do we understand that? Because if we wait for the politicians to solve the problem, it will not be solved. And I'll close by repeating myself one more time. If we think we're going to elect a government that is better than us, than we the people, we're asking for what never was and never will be. We can't be both ignorant and free. Well, I hope you've enjoyed the show as much as I've enjoyed bringing it to you. Please like and share what we do far and wide. Spread the word for us because, kind of like Paul Revere going house to house warning, that's the way we're going to save America. And so we're going to have to literally pass this down the line from one person to another. Have a great day. Peace out.